Director Weber, we call the meeting of the Urban Renewal Agency to order at 6:02. We are going to defer the Pledge of Allegiance to the City Council meeting, so I would ask Lori for roll call, please.
Thank you. Director Weber,
Here.
Director Ugarte, present. Director DeForge,
Present.
Director Dobrow,
Present.
Director Hagedorn, present, and Director Warren, present.
And at this time, I would entertain a motion for approval of the consent agenda. And the minutes.
So moved.
I'll second. Dunbrow and DeForge, first and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. With that, we will move on to public comment. We have two people. As always, please, we will have 3 minutes. Person on my left here will let you know when you have, 30 seconds left. She'll give you kind of a little thumbs up. So I would invite up Cynthia Hurst at this time.
Good evening. My name is Cynthia Hurst. I live here in North Plains. And the only thing I wanted to ask is if this board or the city council at city council meeting would consider changing the makeup of the URA board. And the reason that I ask that question is because there are people here in the city who are paying the tax. And all of you are brand new to this board. And I think we have some people who have been paying the tax since the very beginning and probably have a little bit more knowledge about what's going on in the city. And as I understand, this board makes recommendations to the city council, which are you. And I kind of have a problem with that. So I'm just asking if there is an opportunity to either expand the board and include some URA participants or change the board altogether. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Nate Schwartz from the Road Brew Pub. Thank you.
Hello, I know I've tried to do a written statement and you probably all received it, but I've tried to come speak the last couple meetings and haven't made it, so I'm here to just explain that we're relatively new owners to the Road Brew Pub, just over a year, I feel like, and my husband and I, he's back there, just in a short period of time that we've owned it, we've really poured our hearts and souls into it and really, I feel like, turned it around. It has a great reputation. People are coming in, people are talking about it. We're serving the community with great food and a fun time. We're family friendly, which we're one of the few restaurants that are. We're doing karaoke. We have a line dance event coming up. I mean, you name it. We're kid friendly. We do family stuff. We're bringing musicians in from Idaho, Nashville, and Oregon, Washington. So not only, residents from outside the city, but also musicians from outside the city. And as many of you know, if you've been there, our building is in need of some serious repairs. It's very old. It's an historic building in North Plains, so it's been around forever, but we are new owners. And we need a new roof terribly. It's leaking. We've had some repairs done, but it just needs to be redone. The HVAC is rating at 20%. Does that mean I have to stop? And so it's very warm in there in the summer, and then it's always blowing cold air in the winter. So these two things need to get done relatively at the same time as soon as possible, and we cannot afford to do it. We have met with Bill Reed. We've provided some bids, and we understand that there is a URA program, that's a grant program that's trying to get going. But I just wanted to say who we are and what we're doing, and that we would appreciate any help. we're obviously in the downtown corridor too, so I feel like we're in a primo spot, for any help or any assistance. And we're excited to be a part of, North Plains in a different capacity, but, I just wanted you guys to hear that. If you have any questions or anything like that.
Public comments generally isn't questions, but
Okay,
thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Are there any online requests for public comments?
There are people online, but I don't see that anybody's raised their hand.
Nope. With that, we will move on to unfinished business. Number A, we have before us resolution number 2351 to adopt URA rules. Questions, comments, thoughts?
Counselor Warrington, sorry. I'm sorry. Who wrote this resolution? Who's the author of this? So,
I wrote the resolution.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
A practical question in the rules, I was rereading them, I couldn't see where there was a different color or something to note. There were several corrections and additions at the last meeting. But I wasn't sure they were all included in the new version.
So my understanding after the last meeting was that the only addition or change was to name how the chair is selected, which was added to I think it's the second to the last section. Yeah, section, oh no, this is, yeah. So in section S, it says at the first URA board meeting of each year, the URA board will elect a chair and vice chair. And previously it just had said, vice chair. There was conversation about potentially, public contracting changes, but the consensus was to wait until after the presentation on that.
So I just wrote a note here. It was suggested, I think it was Director DeForge to add board approval of contracts and a threshold number.
So my understanding after the board considered that was that you would hear from my colleague Asen at the council meeting last time and then make a decision on that in the future.
So we're supposed to decide now, you mean?
Well, so I don't know. It's up to you after that presentation.
Chair Weber.
Yes.
Yep, my understanding was that I had requested language around contracts and purchasing to be informed by our discussion. So I was looking for language to be incorporated, but if it will be incorporated into a policy document as opposed to a bylaw, I'm okay with that, but I didn't want us to miss that because I think we did have good takeaways from our purchasing conversation.
Okay, so your hope is we'll what?
And I'm happy to align with the team, but I would say my hope was that language would be in the bylaws about expectations of board review of contracts.
I can bring this back. Was there conversation during that work session with Asen about that I could review and then add to this? Is that, yes, I'm seeing that.
I
Okay,
think we were looking for proposal for him to come back to us with that.
for the URA specifically.
Both, yeah, in general, both for the city council and for the URA. I was thinking they were going to be aligned and incorporated after our feedback with us.
Okay, yeah, I mean, we can, if you guys wanna hold off on this, I can bring another draft back to the next URA board meeting if that's what you wanna do. It's to you.
Director Weber, one other suggestion I had through when I was rereading it a second time, it said in there that to get agenda items on, any of us can submit those to the city manager, but we must get staff input before you're allowed to get it on the agenda. That seems to me like a needless step. right? I would be fine if we had a protocol where people submit agenda items, but prior to the approval of the consent agenda, we can make sure, I mean, that's the time for people to say yes or no to what somebody submitted, but I think that would be an extra step to put staff in the middle of having to decide on agenda items. That's one person's opinion, again.
Councilor DeForge, I support that. Commissioner.
Any other good or bad?
Counselor Ugarte, I just have a couple things. One, I think, you know, in the spirit of trying to keep this body into our time commitment at 9:30, which has been a struggle, the last few weeks, or meetings rather, I would still support, you know, checking in with staff and seeking that approval. Because again, I think we can become very passionate about some of our ideas and, you know, I think having that checks and balances to bounce it off someone else who can see the bigger picture and understand, hey, I hear you, but also we have X, Y, Z happening. And having that vision, I think to me is important to still continue to check in with staff personally. I'm open again to, you know, hearing everyone else's opinions. And then the other thing I just wanted to touch on was, you know, what Councilor DeForge had mentioned regarding waiting for some updates from us. And I was under the impression it was just for city council meeting. Again, if I misunderstood, I apologize. But I am ready to move forward with as presented. But again, I'm open to hearing ideas and discussions.
Others?
I concur with Councilor Ugarte.
It turns off. Thank you. Counselor Hagedorn here, hopefully you can hear me, wait.
Now you can hear me.
Director Hagedorn here, I wouldn't mind, thinking about the URA approach differently from council, since it is a different legal entity. But it does sound like there's we want to take, it sounds like there's an apprehension around how the rules are currently written, so if we need to take time to digest this and think about the content more, I would understand that. So I guess I'm impartial if we need, I feel like every job we're doing is a job we're doing well, so if we have to take time and think through it, I would support taking the time to do this right.
Counselor Warrington, I just want to say, I think that's important to get city feedback on it, but maybe not approval. Maybe we just submit the idea for them to review and to provide feedback, think about it, whatever, and then add it to the agenda. So it's not necessarily an approval, but get their input.
Councilor DeForge, I like that.
Would that be acceptable to the majority to consult with staff? So in a sense, we're not putting them in the middle of deciding the agenda, they're simply giving feedback.
Commissioner Ugarte, I, again, am just gonna reiterate, we have a problem with accomplishing things during our meetings. We have heard from the public that we have not produced results. We heard during the budget meeting, we have not produced results, and that partially is due to council turnover, but also running effective meetings, and that part of checking in with staff to find out if something is appropriate to put on the agenda, I strongly believe should still be part of this, because otherwise, the next meeting we come to, we all think something is really important, and we struggle to even get through to the end of the meeting before 9:30 ends, which has been the pattern the last few meetings we've had. So I personally am gonna stand my ground and say I don't support not running it through city staff for approval first.
Director Weber, my other question would be, and that's where I would welcome input from a parliamentarian if there are any concerns from them of how agendas are decided. Right, if we're gonna give the staff the decision-making for agendas, I would like to hear from a parliamentarian if that's the way it's supposed to be done. Do you have any?
So I think that usually what I've seen with boards and councils is there are two ways, usually two options for agenda items to be added. There's the staff way, and then there's also if the board decides together and agrees. So it isn't just staff's decision what goes, and staff of course takes direction from the board and from what's needed to be on the agenda, but the board also has an option as a body to place things on the agenda. So that's, I think, typically the way you kind of control for, especially long agendas where everyone has their kind of pet projects or whatever. Not that I'm saying that that's what you have, but that's the concern I'm hearing.
So Director Weber, would it be appropriate if somebody turns in an item prior to the approval of the consent agenda, that would be the time for the group to look at, we had 3 new items turned in. Are people good with those? Right? Wouldn't that be the time if you wanted to subtract from the agenda, you could? I mean, that would give the chance for the whole group to weigh in on a request.
I'm not sure. I guess I don't have an opinion on where exactly that should be. You mean like for tonight's meeting, if someone wants to add something to the agenda for tonight's meeting?
No, I'm saying there are two ways you could do it during council report or URA report. I would suggest an item. The group would say yea or nay to my item or whoever item. The other way would be during the next 2 weeks, they could submit an item that would show up on the agenda, but prior to the approval of the consent agenda, that would be the time to decide if anybody wanted to make any changes of anything new that had shown up. It's a way to give input.
I mean, I don't see a legal issue with that.
Could we just kind of take an informal, where are we? How many would prefer that it go to staff and staff decide whether that item gets on the agenda? Is that, Director Trista, is that an accurate, say yours the way you would like to say it?
Yeah, thank you, Director Ugarte. Essentially, I just want to clarify that I'm not saying that we should not be bringing these issues or topics forward. I think the process I'm looking for is that we continue to discuss as a body during public meetings. And if there's something we want added to the agenda, we run it through staff and then staff can decide, is this relevant? Is this appropriate? Is this going to create legal risk, right? Maybe we need to consult with city attorney. And then they prioritize which meeting that might fall on. And, I think it's important also to continue to have that open dialogue. So if you have, for lack of a better phrase, a pet project that you really want added to the next meeting, and we consult with staff and they're like, gosh, there's a full agenda and this is, a looming deadline we have to complete. We're going to push it back to the following meeting. That as counselors, we would, have that discussion and say, hey, here's my business case. And so for me, I'm just looking for still giving that authority to staff to prioritize agenda items that are brought forward.
Okay, can we just then ask how many would favor that? Or would you like to say something first?
I think this turns off automatically.
Hello. Okay.
Director Hagedorn here. I'm not sure the expected outcome of this moment, but I have been doing a whole bunch of nerding out to our code, charter, council rules. My understanding is that the procedure to add anything to an agenda, and I think that this is true for council, but also intended to be true for URA, is that we have to do our best effort to have a consensus on something being added. Now, this is a matter of interpretation, but that's my interpretation of and that's consistent with our charter as well too. I do think that it's good to socialize and be aligned, but I don't think that, I think ultimately our council consent is where we would add or subtract things during a meeting, and that's my understanding of how procedure works.
Chair Weber,
Yes.
I call that meeting, so I support what Director Hagedorn just said, and in the interest of time, we're at 6:25, and I want to make sure that there gives enough time to Tiberius maybe Emily could listen to our feedback and come back with some adjusted language for our review. Just to toss that idea.
Others, I would favor that. We're in a very tight timeline and Nick's come a long ways. Would people be okay with that?
Director Weber, one, on this topic, I'd like to request you think about something for Emily to bring back to you, and that is that I would request or suggest that regarding members of the URA board may request that items be placed on the agenda at any board meeting or by communication with the executive director. I would like to ask that agenda items asked of the executive director in between meetings offline be of emergent nature. A tree fell on one of our properties and we need to do something about it, and it happens in between meetings. And you all didn't have the opportunity to discuss it at the prior meeting. I just don't want to be in the position of picking winners and losers on new agenda items in between meetings. Is my suggestion to you.
Counselor, take it over here.
Counselor, take it over here again, sorry. That's been clunky and highly caffeinated, so that's a warning for everyone right now.
I think really, the procedure of approving a consent agenda, that spirit is for us to, you know, as a body, come to an alignment of who the losers and winners are of what goes on the agenda. And that would take some of the pressure off of the city manager, and executive over this board. But I mean, it sounds like we may need to move to table this topic to the next meeting so we can move forward, and I would be aligned doing so too. I move to table this topic to the next meeting.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Opposed? No, we're good. Okay, so we are gonna do that. Again, I'm very conscious of the time. I'm not quite sure the procedure. If we don't get to new business, do we simply not get to new business? I want to be very respectful. We have Nick here, hopefully for 25, 30 minutes. Okay, so at this point, URA 5-year strategic plan. Come on down, Nick.
Thank you for having me. My microphone working? All right,
Yes, very good.
we're doing okay then. Get the slideshow back up there. So I will try to move through this presentation quickly, hearing the emphasis on running efficient meetings here. We are working on a project to prepare a 5-year strategic plan for the agency. That plan should reflect the priorities of the agency board. Before we can have detailed conversations with the agency board on exactly what your priorities are, we want to make sure that everybody on the board, everybody on staff, the consultant team, the public have a shared understanding of the context, what is allowed, and what are the statutory limitations on the use of this tool of urban renewal. So we've done a significant amount of technical background work to provide that context that we'll be going over tonight. On the next slide, this is just showing the boundary map of the area. I know that the board members are familiar with this, but we're really looking at Northwest Commercial Street, both sides of that. Also looking up and down Glencoe Road, stretching east, bumping up against city limits there, and in the south, really bumping up again against the city limits along Highway 26. The boundary is important because it determines where your tax increment finance revenue comes from, and also determines where you can spend your tax increment finance revenue. And so if there are projects, programs, activities that you want to spend elsewhere, it can't be done with the current boundary, and that would require a plan amendment. We'll talk in a few more slides about how amendments work and what those entail. On the next slide, goals and objectives. So every urban renewal plan is required to state these goals and objectives. They, again, could be edited through a plan amendment, but these are the marching orders from city council when it adopted the plan 20 years ago. And set out what was the intention of using these revenues, what do we want to accomplish within this boundary? So we have all the detail here tonight. We do want to run an efficient meeting, but I think there's not that many of these. There's about a dozen. And so for the sake of the audience and the public record, I will read through these verbatim. So the first goal, promote a mix of retail, commercial, and residential uses oriented to pedestrians with the objectives of implement public utility, transportation, and streetscape improvements that will make the area a safe and attractive location for pedestrian-oriented commercial and mixed-use development. Facilitate the improvement and redevelopment of existing underutilized commercial facilities to expand the range of retail, commercial, and residential services. Promote the development of housing units, including locations above commercial and office space, to increase the range of housing opportunities in the area. Promote mixed-use development, including office space above ground floor commercial and retail space, to attract a broad range of businesses, increase employment density, and create a lively downtown commercial community. Goal B is to provide a broader level of goods and services for North Plains. There are not sub-objectives underneath Goal B in the plan. So the next slide takes us to Goal C. Increase employment and business activity within the area. Create a more attractive development environment for professional and general office space. The plan can facilitate the development of streetscape improvements and public amenities that would make the downtown commercial core a more attractive environment for office development. Provide opportunities for small businesses and business incubators to locate to the area by facilitating the rehabilitation and or redevelopment of existing commercial space that is currently underutilized or vacant. Ensure that public facilities and services support increased business activity and employment. And we go to the following slide here, our last goal, Goal D, improve access, safety, and connectivity throughout the area. Provide additional public parking to encourage retail and commercial activity in the central business district. Implement street safety improvements that will increase traffic circulation and safety. Develop sidewalks and bike lanes in conjunction with street improvements to promote multimodal access. Promote land uses and design that are efficient in their use of transportation. So those are the adopted goals and objectives. I have worked on truly hundreds of urban renewal plans. These are not abnormal. I will say that they are fairly focused. You're really looking at a specific downtown commercial core area, your town center. In that area, you are looking to stimulate new development, including all types of development, both employment and residential, looking at achieving higher densities, and specifically to achieve this vision, focusing on transportation and infrastructure improvements that would allow this to take place. So it is a fairly clear goal and focus for this urban renewal area. If we go to the next slide, duration can be a limitation of urban renewal plans. We are flagging it here because it used to be a limitation of your plan. Used to be limited where all debt would have to be incurred by next month. We do know that the plan was recently amended to repeal that limitation. There is nothing in statute that requires a duration limit. Plans are adopted and then the economy can go up and down and things change. And so it very often may take more years or fewer years to accomplish the vision you've laid out. So lots of communities do not have formal duration provisions. We go to the next slide. Limitations on amendments. Everything we're talking about tonight is generally, there's a few things that are set in stone based on statute, but most of the limitations and restrictions we're talking about are defined by your plan. Those will be limitations unless you choose to amend the plan and change it to say something different. There are two types of those amendments to your plan: substantial amendments and minor amendments. Minor amendments are ones that can just be taken through council action. And so that's like removing that duration limit. If you wanted to change the specific project list, if you wanted to remove any property from the boundary, not that I think that's on the table. If you wanted to add a very small amount of property, you can add up to 1% of the plan's original acreage through a minor amendment. That's approximately 1.3 acres of land could be added here. If you wanted to change the boundaries, or not the boundaries, but sorry, the goals and objectives of the plan, that would be a minor amendment. Two things are specifically called out in statute as substantial amendments. Substantial amendments require a much larger public process to go through in order to have those enacted. You have to go through the same process as originally adopting the plan. The two things that are specified in statute as substantial amendments: adding land to the boundary greater than 1%. So if you're adding more than 1.3 acres, it would have to be a substantial amendment. This says between 1 and 20%. That's because there is no statutory authority to ever increase the boundary by more than 20% of the original acreage. That's a hard limit that there's no way to get around. Increasing the plan's maximum indebtedness. There are limitations on how much you can increase it by, but any increase in maximum indebtedness requires a substantial amendment. And we'll talk a few slides later about exactly what that maximum indebtedness means. Before we skip over this, there are a couple of other wrinkles where you would need concurrence on your amendment process. So everything, whether it's a minor amendment or a substantial amendment, is an amendment that you can do internally. You don't need approval from other taxing districts. There are some times when you do, and that process in urban renewal statutes is referred to as concurrence. And that generally requires you to have taxing districts representing 3/4 of the impacted tax levy approve your amendment. That would be if you're going to have a large increase in your maximum indebtedness. If you want to increase it by more than 20% of the original amount, that would be required. And the second instance would be if you want to add a project to your plan, a public improvement you want to make that is a public building. So if you wanted to build a new fire station or a new city hall, a new library, those types of public facilities would require approval from the taxing districts. All right, moving on to our next slide. We went through an updated analysis that had been done half a dozen years ago or so, maybe closer to a decade ago, that was looking at the list of projects that were identified in the plan and what the status of those projects are. We've broken that into two different slides. This one is focusing on transportation projects, which is over half of the specific projects listed in the plan. And the next slide, we'll talk about the non-transportation related projects. Projects listed in green are projects that city staff have identified as being complete. And it is a solid list of projects. You look back over the last 2 decades of this area, and you can see successes in terms of these transportation investments that were made. There's a couple of projects listed in blue here as being in progress or under development. So Central Business District streetscape improvements, Commercial Street, Glencoe Road intersection signalization improvements. Not finished yet, but in the works. And then there's a few in yellow here that are identified as partially complete. So work was done, but more work may be needed in the future. In a couple of slides, we'll go through these in more detail as they have a map that goes along with them. You can see 2 transportation projects listed in the plan that have not had any work done on them. Number 4, Hillcrest Street improvements, and number 11, Pacific Street extension. So those are projects that were identified decades ago that have not had work done on them yet. If we go to the next slide, we can see the other projects other than transportation, and you do not see any green on this list. We do not see any of these projects being completed. We see a few that are partially complete, including loan programs, real estate purchases. And then we see that are fewer in progress or under development, facade improvement loans, and a new city hall. Other items on this list: storm drainage improvements, water system, recreational trail, public plaza, fire station improvements. Those are authorized in the plan, but have not had any funding allocated to them yet. So if we go to the next slide, we can see the map of where these completed projects are. You can see that these transportation improvements really have been scattered throughout the entire area. If you start in the northwest corner with project number 2 there, Main Street widening, including the railroad crossing. Project number 5 up there is the commercial Main Street traffic control devices. Number 13 is a small dot on the map there. That's public parking infrastructure that was put in place that may have additional improvements in the future. Number 6, still in the north, we're looking at 314th Avenue redirection. Moving a little bit more to the east, we have project number 3, the Glencoe Road and 311th Avenue Railroad crossing improvements. Then we move to Glencoe Road. We've got the Glencoe Road widening enhancements that occurred. We have the Glencoe Road gateway improvements that are partially completed. Number 7 there at the south, we've got Glencoe Road interchange enhancements. And then we've also seen work done on Highland Court, project 14, and then 307th Avenue, project number 12. So a great deal of transportation enhancements have occurred here. But again, more projects are on the list that have not been completely funded or even started to see funding yet. And there is still unused maximum indebtedness here, so capacity to continue funding projects in the future. So the next slide gets us to that conversation of maximum indebtedness. Especially for audience members, maximum indebtedness is not a logical term, it is a legal term. So this is not your credit limit like on a credit card, but this is the cumulative amount of debt that the urban renewal area may undertake over its lifetime. And because urban renewal areas are only allowed to use TIF revenue to repay debt, this functions as a cumulative spending limit for the urban renewal area over time. Once the maximum indebtedness limit is reached, the URA cannot incur additional debt to fund projects. And if we go to the next slide, this plan has adopted a maximum indebtedness of $17.1 million. We looked at city records for how much have been used through, I think, 2016, 2017, and have updated it going through your financials over the last decade and show that $5.1 million has been used so far. So our analysis suggests that there's about $12 million of remaining capacity. That doesn't mean you can go out and spend $12 million tomorrow because your cash flow is something different. But over time in the future, you have the ability to spend $12 million. It is possible to amend the plan to increase that in the future. The amount that you can increase it by is unlimited if you get concurrence from the overlapping taxing districts. Many taxing districts are not enthusiastic about giving concurrence for increasing the amount of spending because that delays how long it takes for the area to close down and for them to start seeing the benefits. So we look at the threshold of how much could you increase it by without concurrence. And there's a formula in statute and it's inflation adjusted. So every year that value will go up. But right now, you'd be able to add about 6 million. Again, that would be only if the agency board identified that there were high priority projects that you needed to see funded here and that you wouldn't be able to fund given the current maximum indebtedness. And you'd have to go through a substantial amendment process to be able to make that a reality. All right, if we skip to our next slide. All of that was a lot of the technical work we've been doing so far in the month of May. Evaluating existing constraints, status report on planned projects, documenting historical urban renewal accomplishments, and verifying the maximum indebtedness capacity. We are now starting the month of June, so we have this agency meeting tonight to review that information. We do want to start soliciting input on priority projects, but I actually think most of that conversation will need to wait until July. You can see tasks 5 and 6 identified in June. Cash flow analysis, and then determining priority projects based on the cash flow, reviewing existing plans. We originally had those flipped. We thought we'd come here, we'd get your input on what you'd like to do, and then we'd look at our financial capacity. Talking with city staff, it seemed like that might be setting you up for failure. For you to all discuss what projects you want to fund, and then we come back and say, sorry, you don't have the cash flow to make that happen. So we want to make sure that we do this cash flow analysis ASAP. We are working on that this week so that we can come back the next time we talk and say, okay, looking at it, if you were to borrow based on today's borrowing rates, and if you were to look at traditional financing terms, we think you'd be able to fund about X amount of project costs over the next 5-year period. If you weren't borrowing, and if you were doing it on a cash basis, we think you'd be able to fund this amount of project costs over the next 5-year period. So you've got a much better understanding of what that financial capacity is, and can have that informing your comments on which projects you'd like to see funded. Certainly makes a big difference if you can access that full what was it, 11, $12 million of capacity over the next 5 years, or if it looks more like 2 to 3 million of capacity over the next 5 years. So that's what we are working on right now. In addition to that, the next time we come back to talk to you, we will have some summaries of adopted plans, your capital improvement plan, other land use planning efforts that have gone on that have already identified community priority public projects in this area. So we'll have those on the screen. So we won't be starting from scratch, but we'll be referencing the plans and projects that have already been identified by the community. And then the goal would be that we could have a lengthy conversation at your next meeting in July with all of this context tonight and that cash flow and overview of plans to really dive in and get all of your feedback on what are the best uses of funds, what are your highest priorities over the next 5 years, balancing capital projects versus grant and loan programs for local businesses. You know, how can we thread the needle on those all key priorities, but working within a limited financial capacity. The next slide, it says the same thing, but instead of a timeline, it's just bullet points. I will say that, you know, in the intent then would be in July for us to draft a plan based on your feedback, and then bring it back to you for final consideration. That plan is intended to set priorities over the next 5 years. You will still be making decisions during the annual budget process. So the plan will help guide you and it will set expectations for yourselves, for staff, and for the community. But still, every year, you're going to go through the budget process and decide how much you're allocating to project A, B, and C. You'll look at did interest rates go up or down and make a decision different. Is there a particular development opportunity in the community? So you'll always have that authority to do it during the budget process. But this document should help set that medium-term timeline of expectations for what you're hoping to accomplish. That's all that I have on my presentation tonight. So again, I think we're not quite ready to thoroughly dive in on let's argue for project A, B, or C, but that the next time I'm here, I really am looking forward to facilitating a conversation of you all to hear what your priorities are. And so I'll defer to you all how best to use the rest of your time tonight, how much you want to.
I wanted to give a little time for questions that anyone has. Just a practical question, would it be possible, you said we've used about $5 million so far. Would it be possible to have a breakdown of how much of that went to transportation, how much went to grants, how much went to the different areas? And then at some point, I'd be very interested too, because you're the expert, is what do you typically find in different URAs? They spend usually a lot of it here, a lot of it there. Again, just when we have more time.
Yeah, it would be easy for me with the data that we have and the contract that we have to pull together that breakdown. It will not show details of the first decade. Again, we had a starting point in 2016, 2017, but very little of the maximum indebtedness had been used by then. It was like 500,000. So out of the 5 million that's been spent, 90% of it has been in the last decade, and we will have the numbers to provide you a breakdown on how 90% of it was spent. We've talked about diving into the details of the older years. It's just it costs consultant time with, we don't think a whole lot of extra information being gathered. So we're trying to be efficient on that front.
Councilor Warrington, I have a question for you. Thank you. Do you have a list of the businesses that are requesting funds for this, for their roofs or whatever they want to fix? So that when we say we want this, this, and this, we at least have some knowledge of the businesses that have requested things?
I would look to Bill to see if there is any kind of list like that. I think right now there isn't. The programs themselves haven't been developed, so I don't know if there's any official list.
Director Warrington, there was a memo from, I think actually right before you were sworn in. There was a memo that summarized just kind of the general applications we've gotten for funds before we really kind of had programs for them. But I can share that. I can send that memo to you. It was from a previous meeting we've had.
Okay, yeah, maybe if you can share it with all of that'd be great. Thank you.
And I think Councilor Warrington's idea, it's great to do a gap analysis, make sure that Rogue and other businesses, so we're thinking about what their needs are, and we've got a program that accommodates it. And I like your idea too on understanding this $5 million spend. Just for my education here, on maximum indebtedness usage, does it need to be debt? Or like if I pay cash for a capital improvement, does that reduce my?
Yeah, so, again, it's the terminology is really clunky, just because of how it was defined in statute. The tax increment finance revenues, which is the bulk of the revenue that the Deer Renewal area gets, can only be spent on debt service legally. In reality, it doesn't make any sense if you've got $1 million in the bank to borrow $1 million to pay for $1 million project. You're just incurring bank fees for no reason. So bond counsel, attorneys that specialize in this, have said, well, really, what is a debt? If you adopt a budget that says we are going to pay $1 million for this road project, we now owe $1 million for the road project. And when we pay that money for the road project, we are paying debt service. So you have the ability, in a practical sense, to pay cash basis, but it still legally, for an urban renewal area, counts as debt and counts against maximum indebtedness.
Perfect. And one clarification, are administrative fees also counted against, am I?
Yep. So any administrative costs that are paid for with tax increment finance revenues are subject to that same maximum indebtedness limit.
I'd be really interested in benchmarking our administrative expenses against other URAs.
Yeah, we could certainly do that. There is a wide range of how much other communities spend on administrative costs. Some of them spend nothing and they subsidize all of those costs out of the general fund. Others, it's no shock that cities like Portland and Eugene are very process heavy and can spend millions and millions of dollars on administrative costs every year. So there is I did work for a city that I won't name, where they were trying to amend their plan to increase their maximum indebtedness. And when they first showed me how much they wanted to spend on administration, I said, why are we doing this? Every penny of increased capacity is going to just go to pay for administrative costs. So there's a wide range of it, but we can certainly, when we show how the historical expenditures have been broken down, we'll show the share of it that's gone to administrative costs.
Board members? Hold on. I just want to follow up, if you don't mind, really quickly. Nick, is it still the case on the topic of using debt? Is it still the case that, for instance, if the URA were to sell a property it owns to a private interest and it goes back on the tax rolls, and the cash we receive from selling the property, that cash can be used not counting towards this?
Yeah, that is correct. So the maximum indebtedness only applies to tax increment finance revenues, which is the property tax revenue that the assessor is collecting for you. Any other revenue, if you receive a grant, you sell a property, you own a property and you rent it out, any other source of funding, you do a loan to a business and then the business pays back the loan over time rather than a grant. That's all. Those same bond attorneys refer to that as programming account. And that is just a catch-all term for anything that's not tax increment revenue. And that money can be spent without impacting the maximum indebtedness.
I blinked and forgot that. Leanne Hagedorn here.
Nick, as you're moving on to your next step, I have two questions for you. When you're doing the cash flow analysis to assist in potential guiding on prioritization of projects, is that also going to factor in some of the pipeline of potential grants that within our corridor?
So if there are grants that city staff are aware of, then we should absolutely reflect those in there.
Okay, it would be great. And then as you're doing that analysis, would you be able to project some sort of return on investment as you're looking at this portfolio of opportunities, capital projects, as well as these grants? Would you be able to give us some sort of barometer of return on investment?
Yes, but so the return on investment for building a road widening improvement versus putting dollars specifically into a new roof on a local business, they're just fundamentally different calculations. And so, putting a new roof on a business might be one contributing factor to keeping that business here and those jobs here in the local community, and an amenity that the public wants to come to and has a more attractive downtown feel that you like walking through. Those are hard to put into numbers, whereas doing the street may mean that you've got vacant lots along the street that are now more likely to redevelop. And when they redevelop, we estimate that the new building might be worth a certain amount of money and it might pay this amount of property taxes. And then you've got this real sort of cash flow oriented return on investment. But it's all built on speculation, what will develop there. So usually it's in this type of analysis where you're doing a lot of apples to oranges comparison.
Yeah.
It's kind of best to describe qualitatively what are the benefits of this improvement and what's the price tag associated with it. If you're comparing apples to apples, let's say you've got a new development, you're doing pre-development grants that help new businesses to go through the permitting work and the design and engineering work to get a development built. There, it's a lot easier to do. You can do one analysis for both of them. You say, tell me what you're going to build, how many square feet, what's the real market value or construction cost of that building. And then you can more easily say, all right, they have a specific offer on the table. They're going to put in a $5 million building. If we give them a $500,000 grant, we can see our property values or our tax revenue is going to go up by this amount. And we can show it's going to take 5 years, 10 years, 15 years for us to receive enough property taxes to pay back our initial investment. It's a lot easier to do for that apples to apples comparison with a real specific development proposal. A lot harder when it's speculative development and a range and mix of projects that don't really fit the same mold.
But you'll be able to give us a barometer. I mean, I'm thinking even like 1 star versus 3
Yeah.
stars or something like that.
Sure, they can do.
And then the final question that I have is, we had an extensive commentary at our last URA meeting about kind of a framework for grant programs, and our staff provided and put together a really great structure. We gave feedback. And I was wondering if that's something else that you're gonna bring forward at the next meeting, then is that framework that has your lens on it. I think you were going to give it a once over for us to approve.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk with Bill about that and see how much we're gonna be able to have on the specifics before the next meeting. So I haven't looked at it yet, so I'm not sure that we'll see exactly how much we can dig into before that meeting. But I know that, I mean, obviously grants are one of the very clear projects on the table here for a high priority. And so having as much clarity on that as possible, with recognizing it's for the next meeting, it's not necessarily critical to know, is our maximum grant amount going to be 50,000 or 100,000? And you know, do we have a loan program or a grant program? You know, like the details can still be determined once the overall priority has been set.
Excellent job, but time is up. So thank you very much for coming, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. Oh,
They can ask you the next time. We're good.
I'm sorry, I
No
never spot time. Okay.
Thank you all.
As we look at the agenda now, would it be possible, group, could we defer the IGA to the next meeting? Would that be acceptable? We good? Question?
You can just pass it real quick. It only takes a motion.
I wouldn't be ready to pass it yet. Others, are you ready to pass it?
I
Or
would
would
like
you
to
rather
discuss
defer?
Next meeting.
Okay,
And there's some,
Question.
Director working there, there's some, agenda item, issues in that we need to address before we approve it. So we
Okay.
need to review, agenda D subsection 1 and 3, because it clearly outlines how we add agenda items.
okay, we will defer that to the next one. Future agenda. Item discussion, I don't know if that would be okay if we just move to board and staff comments where people can just tie that in with any requests you have for the next agenda. And I don't know on the PAC, Director DeForge, you're okay?
Yeah, let's defer on that.
Defer.
No updates.
Okay, so let's just go down. If anybody has any comments they would like to make as a director, anything they would like to add to the future agenda.
Great meeting, no comments from me.
Commissioner Ugarte, I just had one quick question to potentially discuss at a future meeting, but it was mentioned tonight, regarding potentially expanding or changing the makeup of the URA board, and I was just curious, to learn more information about that and, what other jurisdictions do as well, so not sure, if this is something we want to discuss at a future meeting, but, it was a perspective I hadn't necessarily considered and would like to learn more about.
Would the group be fine? I'd be fine with adding that. There are rules around that, but we could talk about them.
Yeah, I second that. That's a good idea.
Okay, thank you.
Director Hagedorn, no comment.
Nothing.
My only one was, if we could talk more at the next meeting about the possibility of expanding Tiberius's role in the future. What kind of openness we would have to using them more once we get into the grant program to somehow work with staff, expand their contract, get feedback from them. That would be my suggestion. Are people okay with getting more from Tiberius and talking about it?
Yeah, I enjoyed the Tiberius input. I appreciate it very much. It was very interesting and educational to know what the next steps are. So, future input would be most appreciated.
Thank you. Are we missing anything else? Is that good? Okay, we adjourn the meeting at 6:58.